Former South Carolina State Senate candidate Sam Skardon is now the chairman of the Charleston County Democratic Party. Today, I talk one-on-one with Sam about his plans to move the party forward for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Sam Skardon, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be back.
I appreciate it greatly. You recently were named the Charleston County Democratic Party chair, and I know that election for the new leadership was held last Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. You obviously ran a close election for Senate District 41 in November of 2020, and now you're the chairman of the Charleston County Democratic Party. So what got you from running for the Senate to now running the Charleston County Democratic Party?
That's a good question, Quintin. I think being a candidate in any kind of competitive election teaches you a lot about what political parties can do to support the candidates that are running. And obviously I'm very passionate about the Democratic agenda, improving schools in our state, expanding access to health care, making our economy more equitable, increasing wages so hardworking people have a chance to really grow. And that's why I ran for the state senate. And what I learned is that political parties can play a huge role in making candidates like mine, but in the future, more successful. And the state needs it. The state of South Carolina has some of the worst public schools in the country. I'm sure everyone is tired of hearing it. I'm tired of hearing it. I grew up here, and my whole life people have been talking about how bad our schools are, how low our minimum wage is, how little access to health care we have. There's just so many systemic things that are not getting changed. I think we need to, I wish I'd won my race. I wish a lot of other Democrats had won their races the year I ran, and plenty of other years recently where the Democrats have had a tough time. And I think rebuilding our county party in a way that can assist those candidates in winning is really important and a great way to have a strong impact in moving our low country and our entire state forward.
So what was the Democratic agenda before you came into office?
Sure. Well, the agenda hasn't changed. The agenda is still, especially locally, it starts with strong public schools, expanding Medicaid to make healthcare more accessible, giving working families a chance to build wealth. The $7.25 an hour minimum wage it's a starvation wage, it's a poverty wage. And I see it all the time in my day job. I do small business lending for disadvantaged entrepreneurs, and people coming out of jobs as line cooks, teachers, police officers, you name it. I mean, we are some of the lowest paying jobs in the state and in the country. Our state has some of the lowest paying jobs in the country, and there's just no way for people to succeed here. Our economic mobility, I saw a stat on. In South Carolina, if you're born into poverty, you have the least likelihood of any other state in the country of rising out of poverty. That's unfair to babies who have done nothing but be born in South Carolina, and if they are born into poverty, their odds of ever climbing out of it are worse here than anywhere else. The state has to change. It's been run by Republicans exclusively for 20 years, and the results just aren't there. These things that were last in and have been last in my whole life, or near the bottom in, we still are. And so the Democratic agenda is progress on everything I just talked about, and so much more. I mean, you look at Roe versus Wade, the national Supreme Court level was overturned, so now it's going to be up to the states to protect women's access to health care. And you have Republicans in the State House who are trying to do the exact opposite. They're trying to criminalize it, women having reproductive freedom. And I think it's up to the Democrats in this state and the Democratic agenda that you mentioned to protect fundamental rights for all people. We mentioned women's reproductive rights, but voting rights are something that are constantly under attack, the specter of election fraud that doesn't really exist. We protect rights and we move our state forward. We do create those educational, economic, healthcare opportunities that are so important to every working family in our state.
So what will be the economic mobility for Charleston County in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we have a lot of jobs, and that is a great thing to celebrate. I'd point out that most of those jobs were created under the current Biden administration and previous Obama administration. So I think there's a lot of credit to be had on a national level from the progress our economy has made under Democratic presidents. But we are still a low-wage state, so we've won a lot of those jobs. We've created a lot of those jobs on the promise of low wages, low benefits, no rights to organize for workers. And I think like you said, the agenda for Democrats has to be making progress on that front. It has to be that when you do get a job in South Carolina, you can feed your family with it. That you don't have to work 2, 3, or 4 jobs to pay rent. That the housing that's available is affordable to people who are working hard jobs, many more than 40 hours a week. That's what an equitable economy looks like, where hardworking people really can succeed. And unfortunately, I think our state has a long way to go on that front. And like I said, I think the Democratic agenda, what President Biden has done from the top, and then what we're going to do from the grassroots here in Charleston County, is a realistic pathway to change those things.
And I want to talk to you about all of those issues in just a minute, Sam. But let me ask you,
sure.
Where was this progress with the Democratic Party 2 years ago?
Well, unfortunately, we've lost a lot of elections in South Carolina. I'm one of them, and one of the ways I take that loss well is I'm in very good company. We've put up some great candidates that unfortunately haven't been able to break through. And I think that as a party, it's our job to build our infrastructure, build our reputation, talk about issues like this that matter to people, so that the next time we do put up a good candidate with a well-funded campaign with a clear message, the Democratic Party is an asset to that candidate, that we are turning out our base. We have lots of volunteers out there. We are well-funded so people can learn about those candidates in mailers and digital ads and all the ways that campaigns need to get in touch with voters. And then that when we do win those elections, that we'll have quality people in place to implement the agenda I'm talking about, which I think the vast majority of South Carolinians agree with and want to see progress on.
Let me ask you this, Sam. What does the Charleston County Democratic Party actually communicate?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot we can do. On the most basic level, I think holding our elected officials accountable. Like I said, about half our county elected offices, more than half our county council, majority county council, majority of our legislative delegation, one of the 2 congressional seats that touches Charleston County, are all held by Republicans. And I think people need to hold them accountable for the things I'm talking about. You know, again, this has been a one-party Republican state for 20 years, and a failed education system, not expanding Medicaid, a minimum wage that's one of the few that is still the federal minimum, not any increase above it. Those are things that Republicans fully own, and we got to hold them accountable. So when they do talk about these issues, they might have a good plan, but at this point it's a question of where are the results, because it's been 20 years. It's not like it's been 4 years. It's been 20 years. And it's really indefensible, the lack of progress on all of it, and we need to hold people accountable to that.
But obviously, Congressman Jim Clyburn has been in office since 1992.
Yes.
And matter of fact, the Democrats actually held the majority in Congress. Yeah. So why not put the blame on him and ask him where's his plan for good results for your Democrats?
Well, I think when the Democrats held Congress, especially these last 4 years, you did see a lot of great results. The bipartisan infrastructure package that President Biden signed, Democratic Congress passed with Republican votes, the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Plan. I mean, the list of Biden accomplishments with the Democratic Congress, which was led by Congressman Clyburn. He's one of the highest-ranking congressmen ever from South Carolina, and extremely close with the White House and getting their agenda accomplished. I think is an incredible record to run on. And I think if we had more people to support Congressman Clyburn and President Biden and continuing that progress, continuing that agenda, we would have a much better state on all the issues I'm talking about. I mean, take the Affordable Care Act, for example, was passed the last time Democrats held Congress, back when President Obama was president. One of the key parts of the Affordable Care Act, one of the puzzle pieces that makes it all work, is expanding Medicaid. Is every state needs to go and say, we're going to up the minimum income level required to qualify for Medicaid. South Carolina is one of the last 10 states in the country that has not done that. And so you talk about the national level results. Congressman Clyburn is up there voting for it. We had another Democratic congressman at the time, John Spratt from Rock Hill, who had voted for it and was part of its passage. President Obama signed it. But then you have Republicans in South Carolina refusing to capitalize on that progress, refusing to implement a very strong national agenda that would make healthcare much more accessible and affordable in our state.
So if you have that strong national agenda, why is it not trickling down locally to Charleston County?
Well, I do think some of the things we just talked about have made some great progress. So the bipartisan infrastructure bill, I mean, you're going to see, even though our local congressperson voted against it, you're going to see a lot of benefits in this district in terms of repaired roads and bridges and our port. So there's a huge amount of progress there. The Inflation Reduction Act has made life cheaper for American families on a lot of fronts, rewarding sustainability initiatives, creating tax credits for a lot of green spending that people in Charleston are already doing to protect our environment. And the rescue plan, the CARES Act, not the CARES Act, the rescue plan had a ton of pandemic relief in it that has made South Carolina and Charleston County specifically healthier, more resilient to the coronavirus, and more able to recover from it.
So how much money did it trickle down to Charleston County?
I don't have the exact figure. I should, and I'll get back to you on it. But
okay.
I don't know the specific dollar figure, but I do know that a substantial amount made its way here.
Now, going back obviously to what you talked about as far as the infrastructure, you talked about Congressman Nancy Mace, who's a Republican, who voted for that. Do you understand some of the
voted against it?
Voted against it, excuse me. Some of those things in that bill. Do you know why she voted against it?
You know, I think there is a level of partisanship that, especially I've seen in the Republican Party, that just when a Democratic president wants something or proposes it, they just get a no just because of who they are and because the party affiliation after their name. And honestly, I think that's one of the jobs of the county party, to bring it back locally, is to make sure that the Democratic Party is not a toxic brand name, that we are meeting people where they are in communities. We're communicating a positive vision, so that just because something is proposed by a Democratic president or passed by Democratic Congress doesn't make it toxic for all Republicans to join on to. Because these are pretty bipartisan things I'm talking about. They should be bipartisan things, and yet we don't get the support for it.
But then many people say, hey, there's a lot of pork in that infrastructure plan. Mm-hmm. So do you understand why she voted against it?
I've certainly heard that argument before, and you know, every project that we are getting here is someone else's pork, you know, and obviously I and the Democratic Party am for responsible spending. I mean, I don't want waste in our budget. I don't want my taxpayers, personally, my family's tax dollars being used irresponsibly or recklessly, but there are projects that need to be funded, and again, we have many locally here, and I'm sure there's Congress people all over the country that don't want to fund the thing in Charleston, just like we don't want to fund the thing in Kansas. But that's how the federal tax system works, and as long as we can make sure the projects are valid and the projects are necessary, which I think many people around here would agree they are, that it's really important that we as a federal government and people paying into it make sure we have the infrastructure we need from it.
So how many projects locally in Charleston County are valid, and how many are actually necessary?
Yeah, well, I mean, you see first of all, you and I both relate to this interview because of the traffic. So I think we are one of the most, obviously we're a very fast-growing metro area, one of the most traffic constrained. I mean, we have infrastructure needs across the board, from improving our existing roads, building new forms of transit so we're not so dependent on roads, and we haven't even talked about climate change that much, but you and I are sitting in a place that would flood on a rainy day or with a high tide. And so the infrastructure, not just in terms of moving people, but also here locally, means moving water away from where people are. Things like the seawall and like we talked about, improving roads, doing long overdue maintenance, doing flood pumping. I mean, really kind of unsexy stuff, but necessary to make our city work and make our entire county and low country work. We are one of the most infrastructure dependent areas in the country, I think.
So those unsexy things, which one of those unsexy things will actually work for Charleston County now?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the flood infrastructure that you see going in place. So every day when I drive into work, I drive past flood pumping stations being built, and drainage pipes being replaced. roads being repaved, bridges having long overdue maintenance done on them. West Ashley, driving over 17 from West Ashley is one that jumps to mind. There needs to be money for those things, and it puts people to work. Great benefit of it. It moves us through our city faster and more reliably. This is just about making government work for people and getting the bang for the buck out of the tax dollars we're paying. And I think, like you mentioned, Congressman Clyburn and the President have done a great job on delivering on those things.
So, is the Democrats' infrastructure plan that is working for the people in Charleston County?
Yeah, I think a lot of the projects you see would not be happening without new infrastructure dollars. We've been waiting for new infrastructure spending for years. I mean, it was something that people expected President Trump to do. I remember coming out of the Great Recession 2008, President Obama passed an infrastructure bill, but that was more than a full decade ago. So it's been long overdue, and I'm excited to see all these projects in action. And yeah, we'd be much worse off without them happening.
Now, and I want to get back to that in just a second, but you talked about, obviously, growth. So what is the pace of growth right now in Charleston County?
It's fast. It's really fast.
How much?
What did I read? 36 a day. I think the numbers change every year a little bit, but it's something like 36 a day move into our area, or net addition to our area.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, all the more reason infrastructure is important, and I think it's one of the reasons I'm optimistic in my new role as chair of the local Democratic Party, is even though you might look at the maps from past elections and say, Democrats have come up short a lot, the area is constantly growing. We're constantly adding new voters. So I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that the voting patterns can change relatively quickly. And I think we've already seen some shades of that. It was a few years ago, but Joe Cunningham, when he flipped the 1st Congressional District for the first time in 40 years, that wasn't an accident. I mean, I think that's a reflection of that change in voting pattern, and I think over the long term you'll see more races like that in Charleston County as a result.
Was that a reflection of the Republican candidate that a lot of people didn't like, and it was just a wave year?
No, well, I think there was a lot. First of all, the fact that it was even winnable in a wave year. There have been plenty of wave years before. Democrats did very well in 2008, 2006, still didn't win that district. So the fact that it was a wave year was helpful, but at the end of the day, we put up a great candidate too. You're right, there was an exceptionally weak Republican, but the fact that it was even winnable is reflective of a changing low country, a changing Charleston County. Then that hasn't changed. The fact that it swung back by just a couple points a couple years later, I think the fact that it's competitive at all is reason to be optimistic about Democrats' ability to win elections in the low country over the coming years.
Why haven't you all won elections in the past 2 years?
Well, we've won a few. We've won, so county council flipped to Democratic control briefly. County offices are flipping slower than I'd like. Our state legislative delegation is very narrowly Republican controlled right now, but we picked up seats with people like Spencer Wetmore, my state representative out on James Island and Folly Beach. So there is progress, and there is, as she flipped a seat, I think there is reason to believe that we as a party are getting stronger in the area, and I think you see that in terms of, we went for President Biden by 56 to 43, a 13-point margin for President Biden out of Charleston County. That's going to reflect down the ballot more and more as we go forward, and it's part of my job to make sure that happens.
Are you sure about that?
That it can happen?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
How so?
We can win elections here. Well, I'm sure because I know a majority of Charleston County agrees with the Democratic agenda. I mean, like I said, the majority of Charleston County, clear majority, voted for Joe Biden over President Trump. But, like I said, majority legislative delegation still Republican. Majority county council still Republican. Half the countywide seats still Republican. We have, I think the more local races, we need to build on the progress we've made on the national level, and those are all very attainable goals. There are people out there willing to vote for Democrats that have voted for Democrats. Like I said, the majority did vote for the president, and that makes me optimistic that we can flip that legislative delegation, we can flip county council, we can win some of these countywide offices too.
But then, when you look at all what's going on right now with inflation and everything, doesn't that hurt your chances in 2024?
They said it would hurt in 2020, and Democrats actually had a record strong year for an incumbent president in a midterm. Gained a Senate seat, really minimalize losses in the House. And also, I think the president has done a very good job of taking inflation seriously and doing what he can to combat it. Like I said, the Inflation Reduction Act is all about reducing costs for American families. You know, capping the price of insulin, making sure that people on Medicare have an out-of-pocket max at their pharmacy. You know, those are all cost reduction mechanisms. The price of gas is down from record highs, you know, into a much more sustainable range. Those are all things that reduce inflation. They reduce costs to American families. And so, yes, I don't like inflation. I don't like paying more for anything. But the president gets that, and he's done a lot to make a difference on it that I think Americans see and appreciate, and that's why 2022, it wasn't as big a factor, and I don't believe it will be in 2024 either.
But then, how many people are still struggling, Sam?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
With rent and paying their light bills and paying water and getting food on the table.
Yeah.
So how is that helping these people reduce their costs here locally?
Absolutely. So, like I said, healthcare, one of the first places, you know, keeping vital drugs at affordable prices, making sure that you're not overburdened at a pharmacy every time you go. And then I think we could do more, you know, again, expanding Medicaid. So that's healthcare is obviously one of the major drivers of costs of an American family. My wife and I had twins last year. The healthcare bills are astronomical. I mean, it is unbelievable. I'm lucky that was the first major medical event I've seen personally in my own house in my life, at least as an adult, and being aware of the bills. The system is not working well for American families right now, and we need people in power and a political party in power that understands that and is pushing for change and has delivered on change in the past, and I think can keep delivering on change. And then on the energy front, like I said, a ton of the Inflation Reduction Act is all about energy savings and cost efficiencies and tax savings if you're willing to participate in those things. So I think there's a lot of ways that the Democratic agenda is fighting back against inflation. It is reducing costs right here in Charleston County and helping people who are struggling. I get it. I mean, I've a young family here in Charleston County, combination of housing costs, healthcare costs, the traffic tax, I call it, which is just the time of day you spend in traffic when you could be doing something more productive but can't. It's hard. It's a struggle out there. And I didn't even get into like I said, the low wages that we pay. You know, that adds to the struggle when we're not paying wages well. And so those are all the reasons I am a Democrat. It's not some abstract thing. It is local meat and potatoes issues, how the dollars and cents add up for your family. You know, like I said, the schools you send your kids to, their quality, the healthcare costs you're paying, the wages you're earning, I think are all incredibly important to our agenda and the state to move forward.
So what healthcare problems in the state have you identified thus far that might cost less for the average taxpayer later on?
Well, keeping people healthy is extremely important. So there's all kinds of research out there that says preventative care, which is all what the Affordable Care Act is really all about. It's making preventable care more attractive and cheaper is one of the pillars of the Affordable Care Act. And that no co-pays for annual checkups, that kind of thing. Because if you catch diseases early, if you catch healthcare problems early and keep people healthier, that is the best way to reduce costs in the long run, is make sure that people catch things early, and when you can treat an early stage diagnosis, that keeps the bills way down from a later stage diagnosis of almost any condition or disease. And then increasing access to insurance too. So as an insured person, when I go to the hospital or when I go to the doctor, those bills are paid by me and my insurance company. As an uninsured person, if you go to the doctor or you go to the hospital, you're going to get a bill that you very likely cannot pay. And the result is that becomes a write-off for the insurance company. It creates medical bankruptcies, which are incredible economic drags. It's the leading cause of bankruptcy in South Carolina is medical bankruptcies. Uninsured people who have to go to the hospital for their health care. And you know who ends up paying for that is you and I. Because if someone who is uninsured shows up at the emergency room, racks up a $30,000, $40,000 bill that they can't pay, they get the bankruptcy out of it, which crushes their financial situation. and that bill still gets paid by people who are paying insurance or who are paying the hospital. So it's a huge cost driver to not have people fully covered in the state, and to not have good access to preventable care. And that's, you talked about health care that affects our families here in Charleston County. I mean, those are two huge things that will reduce healthcare costs in the future if we fully implement the Affordable Care Act.
But if you do that, how would that actually affect the state's budget?
The states, well, that's the other thing, is it's just unconscionable to me that we haven't expanded Medicaid, because the federal government picks up 90% of it. You get a healthier population, you dramatically increase the number of people who have access to health care, that you reduce their bills, people stay at work longer. There's a lot of data to show that insured people, that healthy people are able to work longer. They work more days a year, and they work more years of their life. That's productivity for the state. It's good for a state's economy to have a healthy population. And when we don't do that as a state, even though, again, the federal government will pick up 90% of the bill for the state, we're hurting ourselves, because our economy suffers as a result of it. Our healthcare system becomes more expensive as a result. I think South Carolina could do so much on the healthcare front by simply expanding Medicaid.
So you say that the federal government's actually picking up 90% of this debt. Yeah. So how would this actually increase the state's debt?
Well, I'd argue that it wouldn't, because the cost to the state, I think, is more than offset by having reduced financial burden on the healthcare system. MUSC, for example, having more insured patients and healthier patients will reduce state costs that way. Having a better insured population and a healthier population creates more productive workforce, more people in the workforce. They're working more hours and more years. So I think the relatively small cost of the state is more than offset by all the benefits to the state.
So what net savings will they actually be for the average South Carolina taxpayer?
That's a good question. I should have a good stat on what the actual dollar savings are, but they are substantial. I mean, there's a reason that 40 states have done it. North Carolina expanded Medicaid very recently. We're down to the last 10, and I'm worried we're going to be in the last 5 again unless we elect more people who understand the importance of it.
But if it's Republican control, how would you actually do that?
Well, there's plenty of states, and there's, as much as I wish there were, there are more than 10 states out there under Republican control, but there are only 10 states out there that haven't expanded Medicaid. So that means it's happening in Republican states too. And what Republicans in those states tend to be doing is making a ballot referendum. They're a little worried about the political implications of expanding an Obama policy, but they understand people in their state want it, that it's a benefit to their state. So you're seeing ballot initiatives all over the country that are where the voters are getting to go to the polls and cast their vote to expand it.
Cool.
And I'd take that in South Carolina. If the Republican legislature doesn't want credit for this win, then we'll take it. Give it to the voters. Give us the chance to go vote for it. Because every state that has put it on the ballot, I believe, I could be wrong about this, I think every state that's put it on the ballot has voted to expand it. There might be 1 or 2 exceptions. I'd have to look it up. But it is an overwhelmingly popular thing to vote for when citizens have the opportunity to vote for it.
But let me ask you this, Sam. How much would taxes actually increase with this affordable health care, that is?
Well, they wouldn't. It's, again, we're paying for it. Again, that's the other. So if you pay federal taxes, I did my taxes pretty recently here. April 15th is coming up.
Yes.
You're paying for people's health care in other states. So those states that have expanded Medicaid, that 90% that the federal government's picking up, our tax dollars are going to cover right now. So we're paying for health care for North Carolinians, for Kentuckians, for Minnesotans, for Californians. We're paying for health care in the states that have done this, but we're not getting our own due out of it.
But let me ask you this, because you talked about earlier about the healthy population. Yeah. So would affordable health care forces employers in 80 hours cut their work hours to avoid paying for this coverage?
Oh, yeah, the requirement that employers offer health insurance?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about when we talk about South Carolina being a state that supports working families. And when I say wages and low wages and low benefits, that's a perfect example of one. Like, I think it's really important that we, as a state, project a message in our economic development that we want companies who want what's good for their workforce and what's good for their workers. So the requirement that you offer health insurance to folks who work more than 32 hours a week, I think is an important employer responsibility. Also, the anecdotal stories of employees of companies refusing to do that are more than offset by just the numbers. I mean, since the Affordable Care Act was passed, the vast majority of the change has been in favor of more coverage. I mean, millions more Americans, I think it's 13 million, are covered now than were before the Affordable Care Act was passed. The trend is towards more coverage, okay. And so I think the anecdote that I think some bad actor employers out there would do, try to avoid having to provide health insurance or even offer health insurance, it's just not backed up by the data. The Affordable Care Act is expanding coverage. It has expanded coverage. It would expand coverage in South Carolina if we fully implemented it here. And the stories to the contrary just are not what the data backs up.
I know you love helping small businesses. Yeah. So how would affordable health care actually have an impact on small businesses in Charleston County?
That's a huge opportunity for a couple of reasons. One, let's say from the entrepreneur's perspective. A lot of the people I lend to in my day job, they work at a bigger company. But they want to start their own thing. They want to have a chance to build wealth, to own a business. Sure. It's the great American dream story, to bootstrap and pull yourself up. One of the scariest things about leaving a big company right now and a safe job is the loss of health care. I've seen it. I've seen people go through that process of trying to decide, do I want to go start my own thing or not? And I can't, because somebody in our family's got to keep health insurance. So we have kids, and so one of the really important things about expanding access to health care is that it empowers more entrepreneurship. It gives and making health insurance more affordable, making sure that people who aren't earning a ton of money have access to it. That is an entrepreneurship engine, because what it does is it lets people actually go start a restaurant, even though they might not have corporate health care anymore. They would have options through federal marketplace or through Medicaid to access it. So I think the entrepreneur side is a really important reason. And then you did mention the non-full-time employees. Sure. We have such a food and bev economy here in Charleston. I love it. My wife can't find the newest, hottest restaurant fast enough. But food and bev is an industry that really struggles to provide health care, which is, again, all the more important that the non-employer options, federal marketplace, Medicaid, Medicare, that the non-employer options are accessible and affordable and high quality, because we do have a lot of industries, specifically here in Charleston, that rely on that, because their industry is not set up to provide it well. And I think all of these are reasons to do it, and it's just an issue that I'm so passionate about, because it affects people's lives, it affects their families.
So, you talk about families, you talk about wages. So where would a living wage for all improve employment opportunities here in Charleston County?
Yeah, well, the Democratic Party platform is $15 an hour minimum wage, and I don't have a problem standing by that. I mean, I certainly think it should be raised above $7.25. I understand we might not get everything we want as a party, and if there's such things, too much change too fast, but I certainly think it should be raised above $7.25. And when you think about wages, what's the math on it? You double it and add zeros. So $15 an hour minimum wage, you would double to 30 and add zeros, $30,000 a year. That is certainly not an exorbitant salary to pay someone $30,000 a year to do the work that oftentimes is some of the hardest work in our economy. I mean, people cleaning hotel rooms and people working line cooks in these restaurants that make our city what it is. Truck drivers and delivery drivers. You name it. These are hard-working people. I mean, I hate the concept. I passionately hate. Well, another thing that makes me Democrat, I hate the concept that people who don't make much money are somehow lazy or something like that. It is not. That is the worst stereotype out there, and I think it's built into too much conservative politics that, well, if you just worked harder, you'd make more money. When you're telling me I could work a 40-hour-a-week job at minimum wage right now, 40 hours a week, $7.25 minimum wage in South Carolina is $14,500 a year. And that's full-time. That's going to work 9 to 5 every day for every weekday. $14,500 a year. Let's say I do 60 hours a week. So I'm going to work overtime. I might get up to $20,000 a year. that's a poverty wage, and it's someone who's working harder than a lot of people who are making a lot more money than them. And so yeah, again, we talked about healthcare so much because it impacts families. Wages impact families too, and they impact hard-working families. They impact people who make sacrifices to go work 60 hours a week just to make a couple, $100 extra a month for their family. That's why I think the Democratic Party should focus and will focus on, as long as I'm chair, so much on these issues that just they matter to people and the way they live their lives. That we need to support the working families in Charleston County. And that's, I think, how we'll end up winning elections, and that making sure people understand that.
So why not focus? Why not categorically focus on that versus attacking the Republicans?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to do both. I think it's important to present a positive vision that we are a party that, if you work hard, that we want to make sure you get paid a living wage for that, you have access to quality health care, and that your kids can go to a high-quality public school. I mean, those are three really important messages that matter to people, and I think it's important to articulate that positive vision. And I also think it's fair to say, after 20 years of Republican control, that Republicans have failed to deliver on those things in this state. And so it's you got to do both. You got to say, here's our vision, and we're going to hold the people accountable that have been in the way of that for 20 years now.
So how have people held you all accountable?
As Democrats?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think you got to give us a chance. I mean, I want there to be a Democratic majority in the state legislature. I want a Democratic governor. I want a Democratic county council and Democratic legislative delegations, all things we talked about. So Democrats can prove these things work. And we haven't talked a ton about schools. That's the other thing that I mentioned in those three, just matter to families every day. And, the schools in our state, we have never done the basics on. There is actually a direct line. People say Democrats want to throw money at the problem, or Democrats only want to talk about education and make the problem worse. The fact is, we're like 42nd in the country in education spending, somewhere in that neighborhood, depending on what metric you use, and we get results that are about 42nd in the country. We get what we pay for. There's a little variation. You can cherry pick some stats to move it a couple points, say we pay a little more for a little less, or we pay a little less for a little more. But the fact is, we're in the bottom half on no matter how you slice it up. And the states that are in the top half of education spending are the ones that have better results. They get what they pay for. Massachusetts is some of the best public schools in the country. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just got to do what the national leaders are doing, which is invest in their teachers, invest in their schools, do the basics of having great public schools and stand by them, believe in them, believe in the power that they have. And I think over time you'll see the benefits of it. But we haven't done that as a state, and I think it's long overdue that we elect leaders who will do that.
So what type of power do you all have to help change that by working with Republicans?
Yeah, well, right, exactly. So, again, I have the nice job of getting to say what I wish we could do if Democrats ran the state and matched with reality that right now we don't. So I think it's really important that those legislators we do elect go up to Columbia and fight for these things and make sure that we get concessions on the issues that matter most. One of the things that is most directly correlated with high-quality education is universal pre-K.
Okay.
And you've seen Democrats fighting for that in Columbia already, even though we're in a minority. And there was a small but substantial expansion a few years ago. It's not universal, but that would not have happened without Democratic legislators fighting hard and working with their Republican allies to make sure that we made progress on an issue that is proven to improve public education outcomes. And I think Governor McMaster signed it, but that's a great example of the person leading the charge in the state Senate. My understanding was Senator Vincent Shaheen, who was a Democratic state senator and had been our candidate for governor several times. So I think that's an example of it's not universal yet, but we expanded access by I think it was 12,000. I don't check my numbers on it, but it was a measurable increase in expanding access, and that's an example of I wish we'd gotten more, but as long as we are in a minority until we do elect more Democrats who can move the ball farther, I think it's really important to accomplish things like that on the issues that matter most.
So how will this affect our pocketbooks, our wallets?
The education, you mean?
Yes, sir.
The best educated states have the best economy, period. I mean, like, go look at the economic leaders in the country, the states that have the highest incomes, the states that have the highest GDP per capita. You know, if you pick the economic indicator, it's also the highest educated states. I mean, there's, again, one of the things that drives me crazy as a South Carolina Democrat is Republicans in charge act like they, well, we're trying everything we can, we just can't solve this problem. Other states around the country have solved the problem. Other states around the country are doing things that are getting results, and you asked how much it costs. Well, the benefit, the reward, the return on investment on education is high incomes. It's high economic productivity per person. That's happening in the states that have great schools. The data says it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We got to start doing what the national leaders are doing if we ever want to be one.
So will that power continue if you all get in power?
I certainly hope so. That's why. And part of my job as chair is to help Democrats win elections and help recruit Democrats to run in those elections. So I want to create really strong Democratic candidates and recruit really strong Democratic candidates who can be trusted to deliver on these issues. Because the most frustrating thing I can hear as a someone who believes that change can be accomplished through elections is when people think their vote doesn't matter, when people think that there's no difference. And I think it's incumbent on the Democratic Party to put up candidates that are trustworthy, that have a record of delivering in whatever roles they had before they were in elected office, so that voters know that a vote for this Democratic candidate will actually translate into results that matter to me and my family on the issues we've been talking about, right, that affect us every day.
And I want to get you back on Quintin's close-up so we can talk more about your plan to actually
sure, yeah, exactly.
And endeavor. But where are the strong candidates now, and how do you prepare them for 2024?
Well, I think we have a great opportunity in 2024. So there are no statewide races in 2024. There's no U.S. Senate, no governor. So everything's going to be local. There's obviously going to be a presidential election.
Sure.
But presidential elections have more turnout. They have more excitement usually because they get covered in the press more. There's a lot of reasons presidential elections have the most turnout. And I'm really excited about that because all that energy and all that interest is going to then be channeled into local races here. We'll have half of county council be up. The entire state legislature will be up. Half our county offices will be up. Our congressional districts will be up.
Right.
So we get to take all that excitement and energy about a national presidential election and channel it into local races. And so I think it's really important that we do have a slate of great candidates that obviously pretty far out from the election, so not too many have announced yet. But I think you'll see that we can capitalize on that interest, on that enthusiasm, and put forward a slate that really are high-quality candidates that can win some tough races.
You talk about the interest and confidence, and this is my last question because we've got to run. But does that resonate with the average Democratic voter in Charleston County?
I think so. Something I've talked to Democrats about since I've become chair just a week ago is Democrats in Charleston County have to understand that they are where progress in this state will come from. That if you look at the map of South Carolina in terms of where the legislators are elected from or where the votes come from in statewide races, where the ideas come from in municipal governments and county governments, that progress has to come from Charleston County. It's not coming from huge population centers other places in the state. That we need to be where the engine of progress in the state, and Charleston Democrats need to, they cannot give up. They cannot get disillusioned. I used to work for Congressman John Lewis, just one of my first jobs, and he would end every talk by saying, don't give up, don't give out, you have to get in the way, you have to get in trouble, in good trouble. Charleston Democrats need to hear that more than anyone, because the progress in the state depends on them staying active, staying involved, being candidates for good offices and volunteering for those candidates, donating the money to fund those candidates so they'll be able to run competitive elections. So you asked about how the message resonates with Democrats, and again, part of my job that I'm excited about is communicating to Charleston County Democrats that we cannot give up, we can't get discouraged, because if we do, none of the things we talked about in South Carolina will ever happen. There is no path to high-quality public schools in this state unless we elect legislators from our county who are going to push for it. We are never going to expand Medicaid in this state unless we elect legislators from Charleston County who will lead the fight to put it on the ballot. Unless we are well organized and well funded, we're not going to elect Democrats statewide in this state. So that's why it's so important that Charleston County Democrats stay involved, stay engaged. It has to come from here, and I'm really excited and I'm honored to help lead that effort.
But if Greenville and Horry counties are winning, then how could you be progressive here in Charleston?
Well, I think it's important that we be the place where progress comes from. You know, if you look at Georgia, just elected 2 Democratic senators. They flipped congressional seats. North Carolina is a purple state. That progress is coming from Charlotte and Raleigh and Durham and Atlanta. You know, politically, that's what that's the kind of engine of progress Charleston needs to be if we are ever going to be like them in terms of having competitive statewide elections, electing progressive leaders that want to work on the issues we've been talking about. You know, we have to keep the faith. It's probably the best phrase I can come up with.
So where's that engine now?
Well, I think it's here. You know, like I said, 56% of our county went for President Biden, and you should go. You come to the meetings. Next time we do one of these interviews, let's make it after a county party meeting, because at our county convention last week, I was honored to be elected chair. It was packed. We did it. We did it downtown at one of the meeting rooms on Calhoun Street, and good Lord, like it was filled to the brim. You know, packed with people, packed with energy, and you know, again, I get it. I'm a South Carolina Democrat. Have been all my life, and there's a lot of reason to not be optimistic. It's easy to get discouraged, and especially 2022 was a tough cycle for us. We lost a lot of races in 2022. There's a lot of reason for people to stay home and give up on this party, and they are not. And the best thing I can do is tell you, I went over to the East Cooper Democrats meeting to introduce myself to them. They packed out the Snowden Town Hall on a Tuesday night, years away from the next election. That town hall, or the Snowden Community Center, was full of Democrats just itching to figure out a way to get involved, how they can help move the needle forward. So I am luckier than I deserve to be, because the energy and enthusiasm is already there. We just got to grow it and expand it and harness it into some results.
How do you grow it?
Like doing things like this. I mean, I think people need to know that if they go to charlestondemocrats.com, they can sign up to volunteer. They can make a recurring monthly contribution. They can get involved with the party as a delegate to our county and state conventions. So bringing people in, you know, like I said, we have an incredible base of volunteers and supporters right now. But bring a friend, you know. Don't know that there is a large crowd of enthusiastic, like-minded people waiting for you if you want to be one of those volunteers. And so even though there were 35 people at the Snowden Community Center the other night, 45 is better. So let's get that next time. We were packed at the county convention meeting room. Let's use a bigger meeting room next time and fill that one too. So I think we have a lot to build on, and then, like you said, you know, it's a question of harnessing it and growing it, and letting people know that their vote and their volunteerism and their dollars are important. We want them, and they will be welcomed. You know, we have a great party infrastructure at the moment that we can only go up from.
So with Charleston's growth, how do you keep up with that growth with your party's infrastructure?
Yeah, I think we need to be very aggressive out there. You know, I was a state senate candidate out in West Ashley, Johns Island, places that are growing fast.
Sure.
And when I knocked those doors, as I went door to door, it was COVID, so I had to wear my mask and stand 6 feet back, but I did as much as I could, and I would knock their doors, and those neighborhoods are full of people who are brand new to the area. You know, they didn't all come from Ohio. Right. Some came from Greenville.
Sure.
Some came from Charlotte. Sure. Some came from Columbia. Right. Some left and moved back home. But the common theme was that they're all there's a huge amount of new people here, and you got to meet them where they are. You got to tell them what the local party stands for. A lot of those people have never met a local politician before, or a local representative or senator or candidate of any kind. Don't know how to get involved. So I think it's really important to go engage new people and let them know what we stand for, that we are a very focused on results, on issues that matter to people. That's the party we are, and we're talking about education, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about our economy and how it works for your family. And that's a message that will draw people in, I think, and when we go talk to the people who are new here, or just moved into one of those new neighborhoods, that's a huge opportunity for expansion. That was my experience when I was a candidate, was I got a welcome reception out there, and I think as a party we need to keep building on that.
Sam Skardon with the Charleston County Democratic Party. Thank you for your time, and again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Can't wait to come back.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Quintin.
Thank you.
Cool.